The bunker was barely a bunker all just a hollowed-out basement beneath what used to be a grocery store. The ceiling groaned every time something exploded above, shedding dust like dry snow. Sergeant Mikhail Orlov sat hunched over the radio transmitter, a battered metal box that had outlived 2 units and more than a dozen bombardments. The red on-air bulb flickered weakly, as if unsure it could survive one more broadcast. Mikhail rubbed his temples. He hadn't slept properly in days, and every blink felt like dragging shutters down over broken windows. Private Sokolov stood nearby, adjusting the improvised antenna they had built out of pipe, scraps and torn copper wiring. The soldier's hands shook, not from cold, though the bunker was freezing, but from the constant thrum of adrenaline that never left anymore. Outside, the drone war over Pokrovsk buzzed like a swarm of angry metal insects. The sound seeped through concrete, always present, always overhead. Sometimes it grew louder suddenly, like a bee near one's ear, and every man in the bunker would flinch. "We're broadcasting again," Mikhail said, though Sokolov already knew. It was a ritual, these few minutes of speaking into the void, hoping someone, anyone, was listening on the other end. Mikhail pressed the transmitter switch. The red light steadied. "This is Unit 17, he began, his voice low at first, then cracking as he forced strength into it. "To anyone listening, we're still holding our position. Pokrovsk is—" He hesitated. The next word could have been alive, but that wasn't true. Falling felt too final. So he said, "Bleeding. The drone strikes don't stop. The sky, it never stops screaming." A distant concussion rolled through the bunker, rattling a jar of nails on a shelf. The lights flickered. Sokolov muttered a curse under his breath and steadied the antenna again. Mikhail leaned closer to the microphone. "They come in waves now. Big drones, small drones, ones that hover, ones that dive. Some just watch us, some—" He cut himself off as another explosion boomed above, closer this time. Bits of plaster rained onto his shoulders. "This place used to be a neighborhood. Children, shops, buses." His voice softened. "Now it feels like the machines have taken the sky, and we're just crawling beneath them." Static hissed for a moment like the world was thinking. Mikhail exhaled. "If you hear us, just know we're still here. Unit 17 is still alive." The red light wavered again, struggling to stay lit in the dark. Private Sokolov moved quietly through the bunker's narrow exit tunnel, the stale air turning colder as he neared the surface. He paused at the ladder, listening. In Pokrovsk, silence was never peace. It was camouflage for something worse. After a few long breaths, he climbed up and pushed aside the slab of concrete covering their only way out. Dawn had barely touched the sky. A pale, washed-out light hung over the ruins, like a faint memory of morning. Sokolov lifted himself onto the rubble of what was once a 5-story apartment block, though now it was just a jagged heap of broken lives, crumbled walls, twisted metal, and fragments of people's pasts scattered everywhere. A child's shoe lay half-buried near his foot. He tried not to look at it. He crouched low and raised his scope. The air vibrated with the hum of drones. He spotted the first one immediately, a small quadcopter drifting above the main street, gliding smoothly between the burned-out husks of cars. Its lens rotated with eerie precision, sweeping the area like a patient hunter. Then he saw another and another, 6 in total, circling at different heights. They moved with methodical rhythm, the kind of coordination no human squad could match. "They're learning," he whispered to himself. It wasn't paranoia. He had seen it too many times. Drones adjusting their patterns, responding to decoys, changing altitude when they detected hidden heat signatures. Some even lingered near cracks in buildings as if they could smell human breath. Sokolov shifted behind a slab of concrete, careful not to disturb a loose pipe that might clatter and give away his position. The machines above weren't just watching, they were listening. One of the smaller drones jerked suddenly, its rotors dipping as it honed in on a sound he couldn't hear. "Easy, easy," he breathed. He kept the scope trained on it. The drone hovered only meters above the ground now, its sensor blinking like a cold, unblinking eye. It paused over an overturned trash bin, scanned it, then shot back upward, disappearing into the swarm. Sokolov exhaled, long and slow. For a moment, he let his gaze drift to the distant skyline, what was left of it. Pokrovsk had once been busy, loud, alive. Now it looked like a skeleton city, an empty frame picked clean by the sky. He touched the radio at his chest. "Orlov," he murmured, barely audible. "They're out again. 6 today, maybe more." His voice trembled despite his effort to control it. The drones buzzed on, relentless, as if they owned the ruined morning. Night slid over Pokrovsk like a curtain of ash, swallowing what little light remained. In the bunker, the soldiers moved carefully, speaking in hushed tones that barely rose. Above the constant hum of generators and the faint echo of distant strikes, darkness should have been their ally. But in this war, the night belonged to the drones, thermal hunters. They didn't need daylight. They saw heat, motion, breath. Sergeant Mikhail Orlov sat at the center table. The cracked tablet glowing weakly in front of him. Its screen flickered, with shifting lines and blips representing drone flight. Paths recorded earlier that day. He traced one route with a trembling finger. The drones had flown lower at dusk. That meant they were mapping the ground for movement. "They're narrowing the net," he said quietly. Around him, the others listened without interrupting. Even the youngest soldier, barely out of training, kept his fear silent. The bunker felt smaller tonight, the air tighter. Shadows clung to the corners like living things. Private Antonenko, older, rough-voiced, always honest, leaned back against the concrete wall. "If we don't move before dawn," he muttered, "we won't make it another day." Someone laughed, a short, brittle sound with no humor. "Move where?" "There's nowhere left to move. The roads are traps. The city center is dust. The fields outside are crawling with sensors." The generator buzzed louder for a moment, as if agreeing. Mikhail rubbed his eyes, feeling the burn of exhaustion. "Staying here is suicide." But wondering how blind, he didn't finish. He didn't need to. A sudden burst of radio static snapped every head toward the far wall. The old receiver crackled violently, then resolved into a shaky, distant voice. Another squad, numbering off positions, requesting guidance. Their words overlapped with the thundering pulse of nearby drones. Someone shouted on the other end. The transmission warped, then died abruptly. Silence fell again, heavier than before. No one spoke. No one moved. It was the kind of silence that made the heart pound louder, as if the machines outside might hear it. Sokolov finally cleared his throat. "We should decide tonight, stay or go, before the morning scanners sweep again." Mikhail swallowed hard, feeling the weight of their fear and trust pressing against him. He looked at the trembling map on the tablet. There were no safe paths, only choices between dying slower or faster. "We'll choose together," he said, though he wasn't sure if that was true. The darkness around them felt like a judge, waiting for their decision. Above, the distant hum of drones continued, steady, patient, merciless. The first light of dawn crept over Pokrovsk like a reluctant visitor, filtering weakly through the cracks in the bunker's ceiling. But even before the sky brightened, the soldiers could hear them, the drones returning. Their buzzing swelled gradually, rising from a distant murmur into a metallic storm, as if the machines were waking with the sun. Sergeant Mikhail Orlov sat at the radio station, the transmitter in front of him like an old friend he didn't want to say goodbye to. His fingers hovered over the switch. His hands were steady, but his chest felt tight. He knew this broadcast might be their last, not because the equipment would fail, but because they might not survive another hour. Sokolov stood nearby, watching the ceiling tremble with each distant blast. His face was pale in the dim light. "They're sweeping the southern blocks," he whispered. "Closer than yesterday." Mikhail nodded without looking up. "Then we don't have long." He flicked the transmitter on. The red light glowed, brave in its own small way. "This is Unit 17, he began, then paused to gather his breath. He wanted to sound strong, but the weight of everything they had seen pressed on his lungs. To anyone listening, "We're still here, for now." A roar sounded overhead, shaking dust loose from the ceiling. The radio crackled but stayed alive. Mikhail leaned closer to the mic, his voice steadying with the urgency of someone who knows time is running out. "Pokrovsk is losing its voice," he said quietly. "Block by block, we hear fewer civilians every day, fewer signals, Fewer echoes. He swallowed. But we're still holding what we can, even if it's only this bunker, even if it's only this broadcast. Behind him, Antonenko paced, checking his rifle, his breathing sharp. They're honing in on us, he muttered. Thermals sweeping east. Another explosion, closer this time, made the walls shake. A fine crack snaked down the concrete beside the radio table. Mikhail's voice softened, almost to a whisper. If you hear this, know that we did not give up. We stayed until the sky swallowed the last of our strength. The red light flickered, fighting to stay lit. We're not gone. Not yet, he said, as if saying it aloud might make it true. The floor quaked violently. Sokolov grabbed the wall to steady himself. Sparks danced from a cable above the radio. Static surged through the bunker. The broadcast strained, warping, fading. Mikhail exhaled one final message into the microphone, barely audible over the storm above. Unit 17, still holding. The signal dissolved into static. The red light blinked once, twice. Then darkness took the bunker. But for a brief moment, their voices had reached beyond the battlefield. Their truth had not been silenced.